See Leng.
Thank you, sir. Just two clarifications for the Minister. Firstly, we're glad to see the COVID cases come down in the last few days. I hope we have seen the peak. So I would like to ask the Minister whether our growth projections as well as our transformation efforts, economical plans that we have, hinges on us further opening up and further relaxation of our SMM. Is that an important part to it? Second clarification is on CPTPP. Singapore is the chairman for this year, and we have read about interest from China and Taiwan. So I'd like to ask the Minister whether he can share whether are we still engaging the United States to rejoin the TPP.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I would also like to thank the member for the two very important questions. First, on COVID-19 and our program to opening up and our economic recovery efforts. First, I should, Minister for Health is seated here. I should clarify that while the numbers have stabilized over the last few days, it is still important for us to continue to monitor the situation. So it may suggest that we are probably nearing the peak, but anything could happen. So it's important for us to make sure that we continue to monitor and watch carefully before we're opening up in a big way. It is also important to recognize that with all the measures that we've put in place, we have been able to keep the critical serious cases low, manageable. ICU cases are manageable. But at the same time, the large number of cases also means that the hospitals are very, very busy. So it's important for us to ensure that the healthcare system is protected and allow the patients to be taken care of properly. And this will then give us more capacity to open up. But the member is correct that it is important for our economy that we need to continue in our journey to living with COVID-19. And in fact, there are three aspects of our economic recovery that are very important. First, the SMM safe management measures that we imposed does put a strain on many of our economic sectors, particularly the domestic-facing sectors, the F&B, the retail sectors, restaurants and so on, face significant challenges because of the restriction of gathering and the safe distancing that they have to put in place. At the same time, beyond the domestic SMMs, safe management measures, it is also important for us to progressively allow workers to go back to work. So far, we have require 50% to work from home as where practicable. But we have to recognize that it is important for businesses to bring their workers together because there are many team efforts that could not be done with workers working from home. So we need to progressively restore working on site, allowing workers to go back to work, and this will help us to open up our economy and allow the economy to recover faster. And thirdly, which is also very critical, and that is our global connection. Singapore is a hub city. We are a hub for business, for travel, for talent, for ideas, for investments. And this international connectivity is very crucial. And that's why we are continuing to open up our interconnectivity. We introduced a vaccinated travel lane, and we are bringing in more and more important visitors. We are also allowing more workers to return from overseas. Some of them have returned home and are unable to come back. Construction sector, for example, is still facing constraints, and we hope to be able to bring back more of these workers through the opening of vaccinated travel lanes. I think the COS of Ministry of Transport, I'm sure Minister Iswaran will elaborate on this. So these are the three aspects which are very important, and we'll continue to work at this to allow the economy to continue on its journey of recovery. The member also asked about the CPTPP. This is a very important agreement that we have entered into, and this year Singapore will be chairing the Commission for CPTPP. CPTPP is a very high standard trade agreement that requires its members to meet very stringent trade practices, and this will benefit the global multilateral rule-based trading system. And therefore, Singapore and our members welcome economies which are able to meet this high standard that's required by CPTPP, including the US and other economies. But whether the US is able to join CPTPP is something that we will need to continue to discuss and to engage the US. But beyond CPTPP, Singapore and US have also been in engagement in encouraging the US to continue their engagement in this region, particularly in the Asia region, and particular ASEAN. And we have several collaboration already in place with the US. One is the Partnership for Growth and Innovation, which was announced during the visit of a US Vice President. And we are in the midst of a discussion with the Department of Commerce on how we can take this one step further in introducing initiatives to encourage businesses on both sides to tap on each other's opportunities. We are also discussing possibility on establishing an Indo-Pacific economic framework to allow collaboration among Indo-Pacific economies. And this is something that is beyond, it's a multilateral, it's not just between Singapore and US, but involves the region. And we want to continue to explore platforms for collaboration between this region and the US, because the US participation and engagement in this region, in the economy of this region, is very important. So we certainly look forward to further collaboration between Singapore and US, as well as the region and the US.
So is it Professor James Lim?
Thank you, Chair. I have three clarification questions, two for Minister Gan and one for Mr. Tan. For Mr. Gan, he had gone into some detail in explaining the evolution of our economy toward exportable services. Just to help us get a better understanding, I wonder if he is able to give us some handle on the share of exports that are currently attributable toward services as opposed to more traditional goods. And I ask this in part because traditional export-oriented industrialization model for which Singapore subscribes to is such that it is targeted at goods exports rather than services. And services exports are a relatively new and undertested model. India and Philippines come to mind, and their experiences have not been as promising. My second question has to do with FTAs and utilization of these FTAs. Minister Gan had spoken about them, and I wonder if he is able to share in terms of in terms of the average utilization rate for all the FTAs that Singapore has signed. And I ask this because based on the available data, I see that, for example, the Singapore-US FTA, its utilization is only at 15%. Korea, Singapore is 8%. This goes down to 3% for Jordan, Singapore, and as little as 0% for Singapore, New Zealand, and Singapore, Panama FTAs. The premise of the question is whether we're devoting perhaps excess resources to signing new FTAs to the detriment of other positive initiatives by the ministry. My third question is directed at Minister Tan, and here I wish to echo Member Fumihar's call for expanding on-demand productivity enhancement consultation. This is in part because, as a business school professor and also understanding the research, SME productivity shortfalls can actually be extensively explained by managerial deficiencies, old school basics like proper inventory management and HR practices and bookkeeping, not so much the sexy tech upgrades that people often think of. So here, I wonder whether the ministry will have some efforts that entail public-private partnerships in this particular aspect. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank Mr. James Lim for the question. On the services trade, services constitute about 40% of the total exports. So it constitutes a very important component of our total exports, and we will continue to help our companies to export, to focus on developing our services sector. As I mentioned earlier in my speech, there are significant opportunities in the export of services, including green economy as well as digital services. And this will also include professional services that we will be helping our businesses to export as well. In terms of the FTA utilization, I think FTA, we have to look at it quite carefully, because FTAs are not, on one hand, FTAs provides preferential access for our exports in terms of tariff savings, because then they allow us to have tariff-free access to important markets. And this tariff savings constitute about, I think, if I remember correctly, about $1 billion last year. And that is an important savings for our businesses. Otherwise, that means otherwise they would have to pay $1 billion tariffs to other countries. So we have this tariff savings. But FTAs are not just about tariff savings, because it also provides greater transparency for the rules and regulations, so that will allow our businesses to be able to do business in these countries. And certain FTAs also provides protection in terms of our investments in these countries, and that will allow our companies who have investments in these countries to have security with regard to their investment, to allow them to be able to operate freely within those markets. So I think we have to look at the FTAs in its totality, and it's not just specifically on tariffs, but it allows many other access, and a lot of these access may not be recorded, and including protection of IPs, protection of investments, and also it provides a basis for even data exchange. And some of these are very critical to our businesses when they do business in other countries. So this is overall a benefit for FTAs for Singapore. Thank you.
I think to Professor Lim's point for on-demand consultancy for productivity, today all of our SMEs are welcome to drop into any of our SME centers or connect with ESG. And on an individualized basis, as I've said, we try to not just do bespoke for the larger enterprise, but to the extent that's possible, we try to cater and tailor it to SMEs. And you can appreciate the fact that SMEs come from a very wide diaspora of different businesses, different sectors, different industries. So I think each one, in terms of trying to help them, trying to reach them, there's not a one-size-fits-all kind of perspective. With regards to the public-private partnership part, we've started PACT, as I've said earlier on. One of the example that we have done is actually a company called Excel Point. I don't have all the details at this particular point in time to share, but happy to answer it separately. But I think importantly, we welcome this type of public-private partnership. And if the Honourable Member, Professor Lim, can envisage that there are more of these partners, early on, towards the end of my speech, I have constantly encouraged SMEs to take that first step. And if there are partners who are willing to partner us to expand the range of service offering for our own local enterprise, to bring them, to groom them, to develop them into large local enterprises, and eventually to becoming a Singapore global enterprise, I think we would very much welcome them. We are all after the same thing in this aspect. What we are trying to do is to put Singapore enterprises, grow them into large local enterprises, put them on the world map, and at the same time offer our Singaporean employees, our Singapore core, a chance at being able to go global. I hope that sort of gives him the reassurance. Thank you.
This is Shara Taha.
Thank you, Minister Gan, Min Tan, and MOS Loh. I'm heartened to hear about the plans for the ITM refresh and manufacturing 2030, and it's exciting to hear how we are pioneering using additive manufacturing to repair state-of-the-art jet engine components. Minister Gan mentioned that the refresh will consider workplace transformation and upskilling and retraining workers. I'd like to ask if the ITM refresh can also include the specific requirement to look at job redesign so that we can make a conscious and concerted effort to design jobs that are appealing for mature workers, retiring workers, workers with disability, or returning to work individuals so that they can contribute and participate in the refresh economy. The reason for me asking this is that industries are already finding it hard to find the manpower to grow. We must use the opportunity for the ITM refresh to realize the latent potential from this group of individuals. And we create not just jobs, but inclusive jobs for all. And we retain the experience as we grow our industries. Thank you.
So job redesign actually is an integral part of the ITM journey because as Mr. Tha rightly pointed out, on one hand, we want to remodel the businesses to help businesses in ITM to transform their business model so as to take into account emerging trends and opportunities. But at the same time, we also, as you change the business model, you have to redesign the jobs so that it fits into the new business model. And in the process of redesigning the job, we need to train the workers so that they are able to take on these new jobs that has been redesigned. So I think remodeling of the businesses, redesigning the jobs, and retraining of the workers are actually integral parts of the entire ITM journey. And I'll be very happy for MTI to work together with the Ministry of Manpower and the tripartite partners and the companies to embark on this journey of redesigning jobs for workers, existing workers, as well as senior workers, as well as including the workers that are more experienced and existing workers to transform them so that we provide them with new career opportunities.
Mrs. Saktiandi Supat.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to thank the ministers for their answers to my cards earlier. I have two clarifications. First is in regards to my question. It's good to hear from ministers' answers that there are efforts to build talent so far and manpower for by sector. But I just want to follow up in terms of the to help to work to enhance the supply of Singaporeans with requisite skill sets. As you can see, in terms of the capability transfer program, I'm looking at the website of WSG, which mentions that one of the purposes of capability transfer program is to develop a sufficient supply of Singaporeans. Maybe can Minister explain further whether going forward in budget, this year's budget, whether there's any amount set aside for enhancements to the capability transfer program. Second question I have is in relation to Ukraine. I think since the budget was announced, the budget statement was sort of announced, a few things have happened, especially on the oil price side. And I think a lot of analysts are talking about Russian oil price shock now, in terms of supply crisis, logistics crisis, and payment crisis, and many crises that has emerged. And the impact on Eurozone growth is actually a big concern now. So from an economic growth perspective and its impact on businesses in Singapore, what are our plans and concerns to help businesses, especially those that are exposed to Eurozone in the future? Thanks, Minister.
Mr. Chairman, I'll take the first question, and I think Min Gan will take the subsequent question, if you don't mind, Min Gan. I think the first point that Mr. Saktiandi Supat, it sort of overlaps between the Manpower Ministry and also the MTI auspices as well. There is significant focus on expanding the CET component, which is the continuing education and training, even for mid-career workers itself. And today, under the WSG, we have significant resources. We've invested significant resources in developing CCPs. These are the career conversion programs. The precursor was the professional conversion program, and now we've morphed it into the CCPs itself. very focused on making sure that we work with companies, we walk with companies, helping them to not just redesign skill sets as to what is necessary for them to pivot and to transform. On top of that, our very close relationship with our tripartite partners, I think DSG is here. We have also significantly, Minister Lawrence, Finance Minister, has also announced that we will significantly be beefing up the CTC, which is the company training committees. And NTUC actually drives that part of it together in terms of working at reskilling and also at training as well. These are just two examples. Now, there will be other programs. Perhaps, if I can beg your indulgence to stay for the manpower COS debate later, I think you will see the whole plethora of programs that we have available. Thank you.
So the issue of Ukraine, and all of us know that the crisis in Ukraine is still evolving. The impact since the war started has already been felt in many parts of the world. And in Singapore, you can also see that energy prices has been on the rise. And commodities, some of the food suppliers are also indicating that their raw materials cost has gone up. I think we are beginning to feel the impact of Ukraine war. But at the same time, I should also caution that I think it's still early days. We have not felt the full impact of what the Ukraine crisis will have on the global economy as well as on Singapore's economy. But broadly, I think I can try to categorize them into three particular aspects. First, in terms of supplies, with a conflict in Ukraine and Russia, between Ukraine and Russia, supplies from Ukraine and Russia will be affected, particularly in Ukraine. I think the export will be affected. Singapore imports very little from Ukraine. I think members may remember probably 2 years ago when the COVID-19 crisis started, or pandemic started, we were importing eggs from Ukraine. So we do have some imports from Ukraine. But of course, we have since diversified our supplies, and we do have sufficient supply of basic food commodities. So in terms of supplies, I think the world will see a shortage of supply from products from Ukraine and Russia will be affected. And secondly, the impact is not just on specific supplies, but also on supply chain. I think there are many assessments. Analysts have indicated that the supply chain, which is already very tight with the pandemic, challenges of the pandemic, now coupled with the Ukraine crisis, I think the supply chain will be tightened even further. So shipping lines may be affected. Flights are already affected, as all of us know. So supplies, number one. Secondly, supply chain. And thirdly, both of these will lead to higher costs. And higher costs will eventually impact everyone. And Singapore being an open economy, we will not be able to insulate ourselves from all these impact. But the Minister for Finance has reassured all of us that we will continue to monitor the situation, and if need be, we will provide more support and help for both businesses, our workers, as well as our households. Thank you.
Ms. Fumiha.
Thank you, Speaker. I have one clarification for the Minister, for Minister Gan. During the COVID pandemic, we promoted domestic tourism and spending to achieve some resilience with locals and also to reduce our dependency on overseas visitors given the COVID border closure. So lots of thanks to the government for the vouchers. I would like to ask the Minister then, what lessons have been learned about domestic tourism and consumption, and whether this can be sustained after the opening of Singapore, and what can be done to further promote and strengthen to achieve less reliance on overseas visitors. So having another pillar, right? Domestic spend. So thank you.
Thank you. Sir, we have to acknowledge that Singapore is a very small economy, domestic economy. It is not possible for us to support the entire population and our entire economy based on domestic consumption. I think during the pandemic, our foreign visitors dried up. We had significant barriers in terms of travel, and tourists would not come because of the quarantine, because of the SHN and all the border measures. And therefore, we had to support our local industry, particularly tourism-related industry, and therefore we roll out the Rediscover Singapore voucher to help to spur demand for the local domestic industry. But we cannot do this in perpetuity, because we just will not be able to support local industry purely by spending our way through. It is therefore important for us to have a strategy, which I think Ms. Yen Ling has explained. Our tourism industry is preparing ourselves for the eventual recovery. So we need to continue to invest in our tourism and continue to invest in attracting foreign tourism to come to Singapore when the pandemic subsides. But it is also important in the meantime to continue to see what we can do to help local industries. And I'm sure our CDC voucher, which Ms. Loh may be prepared to elaborate in a short while. Our CDC vouchers has gone a long way in helping our domestic economy, particularly the heartland shops, retailers, and markets and so on. And we are rolling out additional CDC vouchers in the heartland, and these will go towards helping our domestic industry cope with the current challenges. But we have to be quite clear in our mind that it is not possible for the government to purely support the industry through tax revenues. We need to continue to encourage our external economy, our export of both our services and our goods, to be able to support our local economy. So on this note, maybe Ms. Loh will be able to elaborate more on our CDC programs in helping local industries.
Thank you, Minister Gan, and thank you, Ms. Fumiha, for the questions. Like what Minister Gan has mentioned, if everyone in the House remember, about a year back, when DPM Heng Swee Keat announced the $130 million CDC voucher, remember, he cited two objectives. The first objective was to thank fellow Singaporeans for the sense of solidarity during COVID-19 pandemic. And he also highlighted the second objective, which is to stimulate demand for the products and services by our HDB shops and also our hawkers. And we can all agree, in the last 2 years, our HDB shops and our hawkers have been adversely affected by COVID-19 pandemic because they are really the front-facing, consumer-facing business. And even though now dining is, although it's opened up, limited to 5 packs, certainly in terms of the traffic flow, some may say it is not as busy as before the COVID-19 period, but necessary so because of safe distancing measure. And so in the last 9 months, as the CDCs were working with our government agency, and allow me to use this platform to thank the whole of government efforts to support these CDC efforts. First, a big thank you to GovTech, SMDGO, IMDA, because we work with IMDA in terms of their SG Digital Office, working with their digital ambassadors to support the onboarding of our HDB shops and our hawkers. And this was timely because IMDA and MCI had earlier rolled out the seniors Go Digital and the hawkers Go Digital. So by then, actually, many Singaporeans and also many hawkers and many seniors are very comfortable using mobile phone to scan a QR code, etc. And on the 13th of December, when the $130 million CDC vouchers was launched by PM, we were very, very heartened that within 2 days, 550,000 households claimed the vouchers. And within 1 week, within 10 days, 830,000 households claimed. And I believe less than 4 weeks after the launch, we crossed the million mark. More than 1 million households claimed the voucher. And I just earlier mentioned that to date, 1.1 million Singaporean households claimed the $100 CDC voucher. And we're happy that over the last 2.5 months, we have seen that more than $62 million of CDC voucher has been spent. Now, MTI and ESG have been working very closely with FMAS, HECS, and also to conduct survey on how this have actually supported and turbocharged the market. And we were very heartened to hear from our HDB shops, our merchant, our hawker, saying that since the launch of the CDC voucher in December, which also coincides with our inaugural Heartland Festival, which was launched on the 28th of November, it really brought the human traffic, the crowd, to the neighborhood center. It is because we have designed in such a way that it coincided with the festive period. If you remember, Christmas, year-end, and then the Lunar New Year. So we have heard from our merchants that on average, their footfall has increased by 20%, and we have heard from the merchants who are participating merchants and hawkers of the CDC voucher that their sales have improved from between 10%, some 30%, and in some cases 40%. So we're very heartened, and in fact, many merchants were very heartened to hear from Minister Lawrence Wong, announced 2 weeks ago when he delivered the budget 2022, that this year he will roll out another tranche of $130 million CDC voucher, which means every Singaporean household will receive $100 CDC voucher under the household support package. In addition, Minister Lawrence announced that come January 2023 and come January 2024, each Singaporean household will receive $200 CDC voucher as part of the assurance package, though for 2023 and 2024, the major supermarkets will be included in the list of participating merchants and hawker. So we want to give assurance to Ms. Fu and members in the House that in designing products and solutions like this, hand in hand with our HDB shops, our SMEs, if we bear in mind the objective, which is to stimulate demand of their products and services, actually this CDC voucher has shown, and just like the SRV, can bring multiplier impact to the economy. Thank you.
See Leng, would you like to withdraw your amendment? Minister Gan.
Can I just make a quick clarification?
Yes,
I mentioned $1 billion tariff savings from our FTA. The number was correct, but it was for 2020. I said last year. Actually, it's for 2020, just for the record.
Thank you. See Leng.
Mr. Chairman, allow me to thank Minister Gan Kim Yong, Minister See Leng, MOS Yen Ling for responding to our cuts and clarifications, and also wishing MOS Alvin Tan speedy recovery. So the road ahead is full of uncertainty, and our economy is facing challenges and stresses from multiple fronts. But we take comfort that we have the best-in-class MTI team there, and now helmed by Minister Gan, who is, of course, no stranger to managing crises. So we wish MTI all the best, and with that, I beg leave to withdraw my amendment.
Is the honourable member given leave to withdraw the amendment? I think leave of the majority is given. The amendment is withdrawn. The question is that the sum of $2,804,739,800 for hit V send part of the main estimates. As many as of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The question is that the sum of $6,266,508,900 for hit V send part of the development estimates. As many as of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.